Welcome. My name is Josh Weezy. I work on criminal justice reform issues at Virgin Unite, and we are so excited that you're joining us here tonight. We're incredibly proud to premiere the first film in the It Could Happen to You series, and we're going to follow that with some very special guests. You'll have a chance to join in a conversation with Sabrina Butler-Smith, who's the very heart of the story we're about to share. We'll also be joined by Virgin Group founder Sir Richard Branson and Utah County Attorney David Levitt. Thank you both for making time to join us. The conversation and Q&A will be moderated by the CEO of the Responsible Business Initiative for Justice, Celia Willett. Celia will start with a few questions for the panelists, and then we'll open it up to your questions. So at any point during the program, please send us your questions using Zoom's Q&A feature, which is likely at the bottom of your screen. Before we show the film, it is my pleasure to introduce two people who were absolutely critical in making the It Could Happen to You series happen in partnership with Virgin Unite. I would like to introduce Ellie Canner and Johnny Webb.
Thanks, Josh. A few years ago, I was invited to an event by Richard and my good friend Jean Olwang, who's the president of Virgin Unite. I didn't know what the event was, but I knew if they were involved, it was something that was going to make the world a better place. It's what they do. And I was right. They were trying to raise awareness to help end the death penalty. They shared a reenactment of a death row execution showing the atrocities of the death penalty. It was so powerful. I had to find the people responsible for making it and ask how I could help support their efforts. That's when I met the incredible Johnny Webb and the wonderful Josh Weezy. I always believed the death penalty was wrong, but honestly, I'd never really thought much about it. But this event and that film opened my eyes to the horrifying truth that the death penalty is barbaric and inhumane, and that we all need to come together and figure out a way to end it. And one way is through film. A few months later, Jean, Josh, and I came up with the idea to share experiences of people who were actually on death row. Innocent people who barely escaped with their lives. The truth is, if it can happen to them, it could happen to anyone. It could happen to me, and it could happen to you. So we enlisted Johnny and his fantastic team to create these films. We were so fortunate that Sabrina and Randall agreed to relive their truths of what happened to them. And we're hoping this is something you all can share with as many people as possible and stand with us in our goal to abolish the death penalty.
Recording in progress.
And now I'm going to hand it over to Johnny.
Thanks so much, Ellie. We've been making films about flaws in the death penalty system now for about 5 years. Please do go and check them out at Death Penalty Fail. As Ellie and Josh say, we're excited to release 2 new films tonight, and they are now live, about near-death experiences. Near-death experiences that have turned lives upside down in the most unimaginable ways. The message of both films is very simple, that while the death penalty still exists, what happened to them could happen to you. I want to say a huge thank you to Bruce Goodison, who directed both films, and especially to Randall and Sabrina for so courageously sharing their stories with us. Here is Sabrina's.
Yummy, yummy.
Back in the day, my family was poor. Money was hard for us.
You gonna like this banana pudding right here, I'm telling you.
I was a kid that was looking for love. You know, I just felt unloved. A lot of my decision making was because of that.
Why you putting them broke cookies on there, dude?
I got pregnant with my first son when I was 14 years old. I felt like having children would love me. I used to go jogging at night. It was just a way for me to just release what was going on at the time. I left my son in the bed, and then I jogged to the end of the street. When I jogged back home, I went in this room. I noticed he wasn't breathing. I just grabbed him and ran. I was screaming, trying to get somebody. I was trying to get him to breathe, and I didn't know what to do. The detectives were there, and they said, we need to take you back down for questioning. Before I could even sit down in the room, they started yelling, screaming, getting in my face. I told them I didn't kill my son. I tried to save him. I didn't have my mom there, didn't have anybody advising me on what to say. I didn't know what my rights were.
Sabrina Butler took the witness stand for the first time yesterday since her trial began, claiming to the very end that she did not kill her 9-month-old son.
This was my son, my flesh and blood, and they accused me of killing my son. And that was hard. It took the jury 1 hour to come back with the verdict. When I stood before that judge, and he said to me, we sentence you to die by lethal injection, and may God have mercy on your soul. I could remember saying to him, no, may God have mercy on your soul. I got sentenced March the 13th of 1990. My death date was July the 2nd of 1990. When my death date came, I thought that they actually was coming to take me to my death. That is an overwhelming feeling of fear, because I thought they were gonna come to my cell with the preacher and, you know, the security guards or whatever it was, and put these chains and stuff on me, and then, you know, carry me down the hallway to my death. Oh, gosh. That's hard. For like 3 years, I was just, you know, I don't care, you know, I'm gonna die anyway. But then I got to the point to say, you can't get away with this. I got tired of people calling me baby killer. It wasn't just me they were crucifying in the news, they were crucifying my family. And I knew I had to figure out how to fix it. I started writing everybody I could think about, trying to prove my innocence. And then when I got 2 more attorneys, you know, they were God sent. When my attorneys went to the hospital, they found out my son's medical records were there the entire time. It showed that my son had heart problems, kidney problems, and chronic bowel syndrome. It was nothing that I did to cause his death. Even if I didn't go out for a run, the same thing was gonna happen. And when that judge said, we find you not guilty, boy, my legs just went like spaghetti noodles. And I fell because I knew it was coming, but it's just like a rush of whatever, you know what I mean? I was so happy that it was finally over. After all those years, man, I was happy. I was so happy. I finally could say that the world see now that I didn't kill my son, and that I finally proved it. This is no Walter.
He was a very good baby and very quiet.
I didn't get to grieve my son, and I just want it to be known that he was a very lovely boy. I wanted him to know that we all loved him. My daughter was born with the same kidney disease that my son that died had. And that was devastating to me, you know, and I'm saying to myself, not again, not like this. I am very protective of my children, and I think sometimes a little more than I should be. Things can happen and you can end up in places that you never thought could happen to you, like what happened to me. So, you know, y'all just have to watch your back out here.
She's an awesome mom. She's not necessarily just my mom, she's my friend. Your hair smells so good.
What? Yeah, just
She's been through enough. I want to try to be the best daughter that I can. I love her.
You think that it's all over with, but when you get out and you try to go back into society, that's totally different.
What happened to my mom can happen to anyone, and it can happen at any moment. Anytime, anywhere, it can happen.
We don't need prosecutors to have complete immunity. I don't think one man should have that much power. That's not right. We're not God. We're playing God here. And that's just not right.
That is a very powerful and thought-provoking film. Thank you, Hidden Light. Thank you, Sabrina. And thanks everybody for coming. I'm so honored to moderate this session and to introduce our guest speakers at this launch of those films on this important day. Today is World Day Against the Death Penalty. My name is Celia Willett. I am the founder and CEO of an organization called the Responsible Business Initiative for Justice. We're a nonprofit. We work with businesses across issues of incarceration and punishment. Before I introduce you guys to Sabrina, who's here tonight, I just want to remind you that you can use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to submit questions. We'll be coming back to questions a little later this evening. Sabrina, welcome. That film is incredible. I'm always humbled to work with you. I'm always in awe of your willingness to share your story. I think many people would completely understand if you decided never to relive that story again, but instead you speak it again and again and again so people understand the death penalty in America. I want to focus on something with you this evening that wasn't mentioned in the film, which is what it's like working with capital defense lawyers. I am a capital defense lawyer originally myself, working here in the US, and only too acutely aware of what it's like to literally have someone's life in your hands and how easily that can go wrong. Can you tell everyone listening a little bit more about your trial? And now you've met so many other people that have gone through the same horror as you. What does your experience teach you about the justice system in the US today?
Well, what I learned in the first trial was that I was not prepared. I mean, the attorneys didn't talk to me. I had one attorney that was a divorce attorney that was on a capital case, and he was drunk during the whole trial. He was the second chair. And the first attorney did not do the research that should have been done in my trial. He didn't call one witness to corroborate anything. And then in the second trial, I ended up with two attorneys who were magnificent. And that was Clive Stafford Smith and Rob McDuff. They came in and they had my back. They looked at everything that should have been looked at. And I am just honored, to know that they were there for me. And what I've learned is that the justice system is flawed. It's horrible, because we got cases like this, excuse my French, but I'm trying to get it, Rodney Reed. We've got Melissa Luciano. We've got a lot of cases that I can name right now that are going, people are trying to fight for their lives, and people that have been executed. And that's sad. We should not have a system that they uses the death penalty as a weapon. It's a weapon. And that's what I feel
Yeah.
like it is, and it should be dismantled.
And I think, you know, one of the things that people don't necessarily understand, you know, you've mentioned cases like Rodney Reed, and I know you've working on Sedley Alley and Purvis Payne's case. And, you know, if you don't get adequate representation at trial, you very likely end on death row. And if you continue to get inadequate representation, unlike you were given Clive, you know, somebody we both know, an excellent attorney, also happens to be a Brit. I'm sure that has nothing to do with it. But, you know, the likelihood of losing your life goes up exponentially. I think that it's really important for people to understand that. Can you talk really briefly through like what happened at trial and you know what happened when the jury came down with that verdict and how long it took for them to come to that conclusion?
First off, my jury was already prepared. The district attorney took the jury to a picnic while they were supposed to be sequestered, so they already knew what they were going to do before they even saw me, which is not right. I mean, I had an all-white jury except for 2 blacks. One was an alternate, and you know, like I said, my attorneys didn't give me any type of nothing to do. They just told me to sit and look at the jury. So at 18, when I saw that jury, nobody looked like me. So I already knew my life was over. I mean, just to see that, I didn't have any legal knowledge at all. But when I saw that, I knew, and I was right. I tried to take the stand in my own defense in the first part of the trial and was denied. He said that the attorney told me no, because the thing is, we got it nipped in the bud, so you don't have to worry about it. We don't want you to take the stand. I was denied that. And the district attorney just had a field day with that. I was poor, black, and it was racially motivated. And I know that's why my case turned out the way it did, because I didn't have the help that I should have had in the first trial.
I think that one of the things that strikes me every time I talk to you, Sabrina, is actually how common your story is for someone. I mean, a lot of cases that are indicted as death actually result in pleas in America. A lot of people who are facing the death penalty don't end up on death row. But what is uniformly true nearly always across the board is my clients were always young, minority, people of color in a community, poor, and a lot of the time mentally ill or battling addiction, or had been abused, or were kind of struggling with life in some way. And I think that, you know, it's one thing understanding the death penalty in theory, and it's a different thing looking at somebody who's faced the death penalty and survived it, thank God, and seeing what it's like in reality, right? We try and see these things we can't unsee. And I think that the films are incredible at kind of giving everybody a glimpse of what you've seen over these years. Sabrina, I'm gonna now introduce Richard Branson. I feel that Richard Branson needs no introduction on this panel, but perhaps something that people don't know about Richard is for how long Richard has been a champion and a supporter of ending the death penalty. Earlier this year, my organization, RBIJ, was very fortunate to be able to partner with Virgin Unite and Richard to launch a campaign calling for an end to the death penalty by business leaders. And earlier this week, Richard and I were together in New York announcing 150 business leaders have joined Richard in calling for an end to the death penalty. I think what's really clear is how much those business leaders have been inspired by you, Richard, and your advocacy over this issue for many years. Thank you. And let's tell people about your work on this issue, you know, how you've used your platform to end the death penalty. Can you talk to people about why this issue matters so much to you and why you're so passionate about it, and why it's an issue that the Virgin Unite community has become so mobilized around?
Well, I mean, I think just watching Sabrina's film will you know, is the answer to that. And there are, you know, at least 170 or 180 other cases like that we know of in America, let alone all those people who've been executed. And that's just America. So you know, so I've had a long held view that the death penalty is barbaric, it's inhumane, and that government should never, ever, ever get into the business of executing their own people. I think study after study have shown that it's failed to deter crime or reduce crime. I'm afraid it's disproportionately used against minorities and other vulnerable and marginalized groups. And I'm afraid, particularly in America, it cannot escape its rotten roots. It's always been an instrument of racism, of oppression and intimidation in the US. And I think it's not unfair to say that it's a direct descendant of lynching. And if you actually lay maps over where it takes place and where the lynching used to take place, they're almost identical. And it has a shocking rate of error. In the since 1976, I think, when the US Supreme Court lifted a ban on executions, something like 200 people have been freed from death row after being found innocent. And that's hard work to get anybody freed from death row. And therefore, we'll never know how many innocent people have been executed in those years, and almost definitely there's quite a few. I first got involved with the Bali Nine, who were to be executed for drug trafficking. We failed to stop those executions. There was some wonderful artists and poets and incredibly talented people that were executed. Since then, I've spent time talking to people who've been on death row, like Richard Glossip, who's still on death row in Oklahoma. We took a full-page ad addressed to the governor on the day that his execution was meant to take place, appealing to her not to follow through with it. She stayed it, not necessarily because of the advert, but for various reasons, and he's still fighting for his life. I've had the direct pleasure of meeting Anthony Ray Hinton and spending time with him, who spent I think 28 years on Alabama's death row before finally being exonerated in 2015. And he was framed for a double murder he didn't commit, because the police and the prosecutors literally needed a black man to convict, and even said that to him. So we have quite a large platform, and Virgin Unite and the team at Virgin and our friends are using it to see if we can contribute to getting the death penalty banned worldwide. And in this year of the death penalty, I just heard today that the French president is going to hold convene a convention on this and put his weight behind it. And let's hope that this becomes a positive year ahead.
I want to ask you about one of the, I feel like, you have seen an unusually large amount of the death penalty firsthand, Richard, especially compared to many business leaders. And I want to ask you briefly about one of the experiences that I know that you've had, because you told me about it earlier this week, which is when you met 150 death row exonerees together in one room, organized by Witness to Innocence, which Sabrina works with. Can you share a little bit about that experience and what an impact it had on you?
It had an enormous impact. These were 150 of the most delightful people I'd ever met. Mm-hmm. They reminded me of, I don't know, Nelson Mandela, who'd also spent 28 years in prison. Became that close to being executed himself. They had great sense of humor. They'd largely forgiven their captors, forgiven the people who had put them into prison in the first place. A lot of them were very religious, but they were all with one voice determined that nobody else went through what they'd been through, in the same way that Sabrina is only here today determined to make sure that nobody else goes through what she went through. I mean, just imagine being a 17-year-old who's lost your child, and you've got to go through that experience, and then being accused of murder, and then being put on death row. I mean, there's nothing more horrendous that one could possibly imagine in life. And so, you know, by stopping the death penalty, we have time to, you know, it may take 28 years, it may take 35 years, it may take 40 years, but it gives people time to prove their innocence. And this is the only way that can happen. And I think, you know, and this is something that my PR people have said you shouldn't use, but I don't think you are a civilized society, and I will use it, until you've got rid of the death penalty. Europe got rid of the death penalty nearly 70 years ago. I would call Europe a civilized society. I'm afraid that America is not a civilized society yet until it berids itself of the death penalty.
I know that Harold Coe would say that it was the Achilles heel for America as a dual British and American national. I know that as America advances ambitious human rights campaigns across the world, the ability of countries to say you continue to use the death penalty would restrict that ability to advance human rights around the world.
No, so it's so true, and it's just worth remembering the bedfellows of those states that are still allowing it to happen. Most countries have got rid of it, and including some countries that you would never have dreamt would have got rid of it. But you know, North Korea still has it, Iran still has it, Saudi Arabia still has it, China still has it. You know, is this really the bedfellows that the states in America that still implement it want to be sleeping with?
Thank you so much, Richard, for your comments. I'm going to turn to David now, but before I do, I think it's useful to kind of preface where David Levitt, who is the county attorney for Utah County in the state of Utah, fits in this big picture. You know, in America, the conversation around ending the death penalty is wide and getting wider. And even though we're at a time of pretty great political polarization, criminal justice broadly, and the death penalty in particular, is a place where people of all backgrounds, experiences, political stripes are coming together and saying, this is something that we can agree on. And I think that there's respect in that conversation, and there's respect in the conclusion that we're reaching, albeit potentially sometimes for different reasons. And Utah is quite an interesting place to talk about. The state of Utah has just announced that there will be, several lawmakers in Utah have announced that there'll be a piece of abolition legislation running in the next legislative session, and that bill is being sponsored by Republican lawmakers and being backed by advocates who are the family members of victims of murders that resulted in death penalty convictions. So with that framing, David is the Utah County attorney, and in his position as chief prosecutor, he's recently announced his decision to no longer seek the death penalty. David, thank you so much for being here. I'd love for you to tell people about how you've come to this conclusion that you won't seek the death penalty in your cases anymore.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much. I have been the elected prosecutor, the elected district attorney, so to speak, in two jurisdictions in Utah. One was 20 years ago in a very small jurisdiction of only a few thousand people. And then most recently in Utah County with a population of just under 700,000. And when I took office, I knew inherently that one of the decisions I was going to have to make was in several cases, the decision of whether I would seek the death penalty. And what struck me the most for such a consequential decision was how few controls or checks there are on that decision. People say, well, the government has decided to seek the death penalty. And every time I hear that, I'd catch myself realizing, you know, that's just me. I'm the one that decides whether I will seek the death penalty or whether I won't. And so I found myself lying awake at night and staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m, trying to decide, am I going to seek the death penalty or am I not going to seek the death penalty? And and frankly, I've always struggled with the concept of the death penalty, but I also understand my role as an elected prosecutor is to apply the law in circumstances where it would fit. And ultimately, I decided that one person shouldn't have the power to make that decision. And so I elected to unite that decision with another one of my huge issues, and that is that in America, we really ought to require the government to prove the allegations it makes against people. We have too many plea bargains. And so I decided to unite those two issues and give the question to the jury. And so I charged the death penalty in a particular case. I can't talk about the specifics of that case because it's still pending. I will be completely candid in saying that in living in likely the most conservative jurisdiction in the United States, I can't say that, that at some point I wasn't influenced or biased to make that decision because of all of the pressure that was around me. And that's very, very problematic if you're an elected DA and you start making decisions based on what's going to get you elected or keep you elected. You are pinning your political future on the backs of other people, whether they're innocent or whether they're guilty. And that's just, in my mind, that is the definition of public corruption. And so I charged the death penalty. I assigned a bunch of lawyers to it, and we started to grind through this process. And I started to realize what it was doing, not only to my lawyers, what it was doing to the defense attorneys, what it was doing to my investigators, and it felt like, this is just a big lie. The death and I concluded the death penalty is the big lie. It's the lie that we tell ourselves that it will make us safer. And it doesn't. It's the lie we tell ourselves that we're never wrong, and we're frequently wrong as the government. It's the lie we tell ourselves as public officials to get elected and stay elected. And at the end of the analysis, I just concluded, I'm not that kind of prosecutor. I'm not that kind of politician, and I'm not that kind of person. And so I had a decision to make 2 years into the process. And once I realized really where I was philosophically, I not only revoked the death penalty possibility in that one case, I made the public declaration. I'm probably the only Republican county, or the only Republican elected prosecutor in America who has publicly said that I will never charge the death penalty. And so, I'm up for election next year. We'll see how long that holds. But as long as I am the elected prosecutor in Utah County, there is at least one county in Utah that does not have the death penalty, and that's in mine. And if I can just say this, this is not a conservative issue. This is not a liberal issue. This is an American issue. I mean, anytime we're going to say we're going to have a 10% error rate, that's completely unacceptable. And I believe that we have such a high rate of error in death penalty cases because the jury has just heard horrible facts, seen terrible pictures, and they have this outrage about them. And then they hear the government saying, and it was this person that did it. They want justice, whatever that means, right? And so I think that we get so many more wrong. But Celia, I'd like to point out that there are so many more victims of the death penalty that never are sentenced to death and never even charged, because what prosecutors do is they use the death penalty as a leverage point to get people to plead guilty to life in prison. And in essence, the prosecutor is saying, I won't put you to death if you don't make me prove the case that I have against you, and if you'll just spend the rest of your life in prison. That is fundamentally not only immoral, it's also anti-American. And no one, whether you're a conservative or a liberal, should believe that it's okay to utilize the death penalty or any kind of penalty as a leverage point so that the government doesn't have to prove its case.
David, I find myself as a former defense attorney talking to a current prosecutor, agreeing with absolutely everything you've just said. The same experience is true on the defense side, which is that the factors that you're considering the most in trying to keep your client alive are, is it an election year? You know, in the South, often judges are elected too, and you're trying to juggle the politics of the case even more than the facts and the law of the case, and you become adept in navigating political nuance as much as legal briefs and legal writing in death penalty cases in an effort to keep your client alive for as long as you keep them a client alive for. Thank you for being so honest about that political backdrop, and thank you for being so honest about the reality of plea agreements. I think cases like Sabrina's need to be heard, of course, all the time, but there are 45, 50 times the number of Sabrinas going to decisions with the death penalty on the table, day in, day out, young men usually facing the decision of whether they're going to roll the dice and get executed or take a plea agreement. And, you know, one of the things that I will often say is, if you were to enter into a contract being told you would die if you didn't enter into that contract wouldn't be valid under any civil law. But that's what we do in death penalty cases. We tell people they're going to get sent to death row and executed unless they take a plea agreement.
That's accurate, and it is simply morally repugnant. You know, the definition in my mind of public corruption is the use of a public power for a private benefit. And it's not just prosecutors that benefit. And let me say this, the vast majority of prosecutors that I know are good-hearted, well-meaning people. The vast majority of defense attorneys that I know are the same. The vast majority of the judges are the same. But here's the problem. There is no one in society that is more dangerous than a well-meaning person who is convinced that they're right. And so we become dangerous because we're well-meaning, number one. Number two, we're convinced we're right. And number three, we have the power of the government. Now, if you want to be someone that is convinced that you're right on your own time, that's fine. But don't have any idea that you think that you're going to do that with the government power. And that's why we need to get rid of the death penalty, because it gives prosecutors like me too much power.
I don't know how we could finish this section of the panel better than that statement. So thank you so much, David. I'm going to turn now to some of the questions that are coming in from the audience. And there's a fantastically large number. People are obviously, really interested in talking about this today. My first question, I'm going to take to you, Sabrina, if that's okay. I'm going to kind of combine two. We have two questions coming in. One is asking you about the process of making the film, and the other is about the role of forgiveness in telling your story. And if it's okay, I'd like to kind of bundle those two together and ask you, what was the process of making this film like for you? And how has forgiveness factored into your ability to tell your story?
First, I want to say, David, I have never heard a prosecutor talk like you. And that is overwhelming to me, and an honor just for you to say that, because that makes me feel good as a person to know that it's people like you out there that's willing to say what you're saying. The reason that I do the show and talk about my case and have done the film is because my mom always said a closed mouth never gets fed. So in order for us to make a change as people, we must speak out to the wrongs that is going on. I was on death row, yes. I was exonerated, but my life is still in shambles. It is hard for me every single day dealing with going, it's like I have to prove my self-worth to people. And that's just not fair. I mean, I lost my son And to not be able to grieve and always have to fight other people for the truth is wrong. That's why I did the film. I did it for my daughter because she's going through the same thing, you know, and I'm not afraid. I'm going to talk as long as I can because I feel like that's what God wants me to do. And I'm here, you know, that's all I can say is I'm here. I know I didn't do anything wrong. I don't have to prove anything, but I'm going to talk. So that's the way I feel about it.
Thank you for talking, Sabrina. It's really important that you do. Thank you. I'm going to take a question to Richard now. Richard, we're going to ping you off mute whenever you have a second.
I'm there.
Welcome back, Richard. The question is actually about
Can I just say I was also really moved by David's talk. As an aside, David, I only learned this week that my grandfather was also a prosecutor, prosecuted somebody 100 years ago who ended up going to the gallows. And it was the biggest thing he regretted the whole of his life. So he went to his grave regretting that he was on the prosecuting side of such a thing.
I'm sure he's proud of you today, Richard.
Thank you. But that case, interestingly, that case was political. I think. I mean, it was an IRA member, and that's the other danger with the death penalty is that it can be used for political purposes. So, anyway, thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you for mentioning that too, Richard. That's a fascinating story. I feel like this is quite an emotional panel for all of us, actually. I too have never heard a prosecutor speak like you, David, and I very, very strongly believe it's essential that we hear voices like yours in this conversation. And I hope you will, as Richard has done with business leaders, inspire more of your peers to be open. I believe very strongly that you are not the only prosecutor that has felt this way. But you are the only prosecutor that has publicly expressed this. So it's one thing believing it, and it's another thing speaking your belief. So thank you.
Thank you. And I will say, I know that there are other prosecutors that feel the same way. There are many prosecutors that feel the same way. And what I say to them, you need to just jump in. The water's cold and icy and freezing, but you'll feel great about it.
Yeah, I have definitely had these conversations with prosecutors too, where they've said to me, my hands are tied, Celia, I don't agree with the death penalty, but we have to pursue it. And not many of them have the bravery and the courage that you do to speak out. I'm going to ask Richard a similar question, which relates to courage and speaking out, which is, I do think it's true that business leaders have traditionally shied away from the issue of the death penalty, perhaps seeing it as a little politically fraught. I think this conversation today is proving that it is no longer sort of polarizing or politically fraught. But the question that is coming in for you, Richard, is what is your message to other business leaders about this issue?
I think the important thing is to learn the facts. And therefore, listening to programs like this, I think, will give business leaders the facts. I think some business leaders, like some members of society, they just feel, if somebody kills somebody, they deserve to be executed, and that's it. But once you dig deeper and you realize, how many innocent people are being executed and how it's a lot more expensive to execute somebody than put them into prison, and keep digging, then I think you can convert pretty well all business leaders. And actually, business leaders, I mean, politicians shouldn't have prosecutors shouldn't have an excuse. In Britain, prosecutors are not people who get elected, but become elected officials, and therefore they don't have, they can actually not let politics interfere. They can just make the right decisions. In America, that seems a fundamental flaw. But business leaders have no excuse. I mean, they're human beings in society. They've got children and grandchildren, and they should just say the right thing. And I think more and more of them can and will do so.
I agree. I certainly agree. I think business leaders are certainly inspired by their ability to have an impact, you know, and their ability to like move the conversation and use their kind of leverage and their social capital to achieve something that perhaps individually we would not be able to achieve, but collectively the four of us are able to achieve. David, I'm going to stay with you for a minute and ask you a couple of questions, if that's okay. One of them I know you're going to answer really well. And then I'm going to ask you a second one immediately afterwards. So there's a question coming in asking about whether it is more expensive, whether it costs more to seek the death penalty than it does to go for a life sentence.
Let me just say this quickly, and the short answer is much more expensive to prosecute a death penalty case. In the death penalty case that I prosecuted, my jurisdiction, because of my decision, spent over $3 million in the prosecution phase, and we're still not to trial yet.
Yeah.
A month-long homicide case that doesn't have the death penalty will cost about $70,000.
Wow. And that's only trial. And that's literally only trial.
That's right.
And what people need to understand is, even if you're very sure as a prosecutor that you've got the right person and the right result, there is an automatic appeal process in death penalty cases, as in an effort to create a safety valve that, thank God, we have, because of, you know, Sabrina is living proof of this. And
Absolutely.
That $3 million is just on the prosecutor's side and just at trial.
But let me say this: as I have began to walk this this path, I have stopped using expense and money as the reason behind getting rid of the death penalty. There is no injustice greater than killing an innocent person. And when we say we'll spare no expense at finding justice, then we need to simply remove the issue of cost and understand that putting innocent people on death row and even putting innocent people in jail or prison is something that we've got to get our arms around in society.
The next question I'm going to ask you, David, is I know what the answer will be, but how much pushback have you got from your announcement to not seek the death penalty?
I will say I underestimated the furor that I was causing. To me, I was making a decision in one case. I was making a decision as a matter of conscience, and I thought that I would take a bit of a hit and move on. But the response has been both troubling on the one hand and extremely gratifying on the other. People, I wouldn't be here with you without having made that decision, and I'm so grateful for that association. But there are people who truly do feel betrayed in my jurisdiction by my announcement, and there certainly is a movement now to get rid of me, and that's a consequence I'll face. If that means I lose my job, then I will have done so gratefully and proudly. But I will say this: I think that Richard is absolutely accurate when he says when we have the opportunity to sit down and reason with people, people change their minds on this, and that's why I am just leaning into this. Just for that reason. This is not. And frankly, it's not about my reelection, though I think it's important for the movement. But really, how we treat people that have been convicted of crimes, that speaks more about us than it does about them. And we simply have to elevate our vision and our expectations and realize that we have a higher moral duty to treat people with dignity and respect, even if we're certain that they're guilty.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is a metaphor for leaders everywhere, in all positions. Sabrina,
can I piggyback
please,
off of that? I want to say that what he's saying is so true, but a lot of things that the public don't understand is that a person with a life sentence or accused of the crime that they charged me with, killing a child, you are not safe in prison. I had to fight every day of my life to stay alive for this, charged with this. So that is a death sentence in itself. When you talk about the death penalty, just to get a life sentence is a death sentence. And you're not safe when you're in prison. So I don't understand the two, they don't go together. The rush to kill with this death penalty, and it's the same thing without a death sentence in prison. So people don't understand that when you are sentenced with these type of charges, killing of a child, killing of a woman, anything like that, you are on standby for your life.
Yeah, it's certainly not the easy option.
It's not.
People
It's
taking
not
a
walk
life
in the
sentence
park in prison.
And can I just say, Sabrina, I mean, I said this off camera before we started, but I am so sorry for what's occurred to you. No human being should have to endure what you've endured. And I'm so sorry that so many people were not as fortunate as you to get out of your situation, but grateful that you're lending your voice to this effort.
Thank you, David. I just said the guys that said witness to innocence, it's a lot of us, and we are traumatized due to what has happened. And nobody said, I'm sorry, or gave us any type of help. So what do you say to the people that you traumatize like that? And then you say, okay, yeah, you off death row, going about your business. It doesn't work like that. A mind is a terrible thing to waste. It's a terrible thing. You go to prison and it's definitely wasted when you go through these type of problems and issues. That's traumatizing. So, I mean, people out there should think about what happens when you convict an innocent person to die for something they didn't do. Think about it. What if it was you? What would you do? What
Sabrina,
was your family members?
A couple of the questions coming in are asking you really directly this question. Has the prosecutor in your case ever reached out to you or apologized to you? Have you ever heard from the jury? And what about the lawyers that represented you in your first trial?
The prosecution never apologized. Matter of fact, he's no longer the district attorney. When I got out of prison, I started pounding the pavement to get him out of office because he was racist. So we did, and we got a fair prosecutor, and that's the way it should have been in the first place. You know, look at the charges that are before you. Do the job. You know what I mean? That's what it's about. And as far as the jury, one of the juries sent back his pay for saying that he was, they talked to him before the trial. So he kind of knew what was going on. So he sent back his pay. In the first attorney, he actually helped, he wrote the brief to go before the Supreme Court, state Supreme Court.
Has the state given you a big payment or apologized as a state?
The state gave me what they thought it was worth. They didn't. They just said, "Here, take this little change. Go ahead." That's what they did. You know.
I mean, do they with it? Because talking to the 150 people in the room in New York, they said the states almost have a policy of never apologizing to anybody that is released from death row, which seems abysmal. But I don't, I didn't find anybody who'd had any compensation or any apologies from the state.
Well, in 2009, Mississippi passed a law for exonerees to receive compensation, but it was what they figured it was worth. I mean, they decided what it should be, and it wasn't nothing to live on. No.
There's a larger message here on that point. And I mean, when you talk about the nearly unfettered immunity that a prosecutor has, I mean, typically someone who does something wrong isn't going to apologize because they don't want to face liability, right? But in this instance, we don't have liability. And so the question is, with that nearly absolute immunity that we have as prosecutors, why aren't we apologizing? We are the government, and when we and we're just human beings, and when we get it wrong, then our role not only as the government, but our role as human beings ought to be to apologize. But it takes there's more to it, because really what is at its core is human fear and human pride. And those are dangerous components to have coupled with government power.
He didn't apologize, but I still forgave him because I know that no matter what he did to me, he can't hold me down. You know, I can't live my life according to what he did. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I know that there's a bigger purpose, and the bigger purpose is to help get rid of the death penalty, no matter what he did. And I've got my life and I got my children to live for. So that's kind of how I live my life, you know. He's over there and I'm over here.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
I feel like Sabrina Butler-Smith telling us how nothing can keep her down is the perfect way to end this panel this evening. Truly, Sabrina Butler-Smith, nothing can keep you down. And with Richard and David on your side, I have a feeling that you're going to win.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Richard, as always, I'm in awe of working with you. David, thank you. I don't even know how to begin to thank you. And Sabrina, I'm humbled by your willingness to tell your story again and again, no matter how painful, to try and make the point. The point has been made, Sabrina, and it's great to work with you. I'm going to hand back to Josh. That's all the time we have for questions this evening. This has been an extraordinary panel with extraordinary guests, and I'm very proud to have been part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, David. Thank you, Celia, for such an incredible conversation. Thank you, Sabrina, for your courage, for sharing your difficult story again and again, and to your family and the whole Witness Innocence team that's supporting you. We want to thank Ellie and Johnny, and out there watching tonight, thank you to Gina Ollwang, who leads Virgin Unite, for your time, vision, and dedication invested in making this happen. For all of you who participated in this premiere, we just put links up to Sabrina's film. We also have a link up to Randall's film. You should watch both. We hope you share both. We also have both films on witnesstoinnocence.org. So you can go straight to witnesstoinnocence.org if you don't want to capture the links here. And there are links to share those. We have an action hub there as well. So Sabrina mentioned some of the ongoing innocence cases. Richard mentioned one. There are people with overwhelming evidence that they are innocent who are trying to get that chance to prove it in court. And Witness to Innocence is tracking those cases, and exonerees like Sabrina and Randall, whose story you haven't seen yet, are out there pushing to help make that happen. So we hope you get involved. We hope you sign up, and we'll send everybody who registered a follow-up email with all of these details as well. So this is a really special moment. We have really incredible people coming together. We have momentum, and with your help, we will end the death penalty. Thank you very much.